good evening and good Yom Tov. Happy birthday to all of us. It's Yud Aleph Nissen. And this is our 30th and final letter. Not our final letter ever, because surely we will continue learning Igros. But our final letter for this hachana, this preparation for Yud Aleph Nissen. And hopefully the letters that we have studied until now have helped us to spend this day in a fitting way and to continue in through the night. This is our, for some of us, this is our Yud Aleph Nissen Verbringen. So welcome to the unofficial Yud Aleph Nissen Verbringen. I'll say l'chaim on my seltzer, l'chaim. Okay. Before we begin, I want to dedicate tonight's class to a good friend, somebody who is a big fan of this initiative, somebody who loves the Rebbe and loves learning the Rebbe's Torah and gets special enjoyment from sharing the Rebbe's Torah with the world. Maher Eliezer ben Rezel Rivka and his wife, Leah Dveira Bas Masha. That's my friend Maher Schmuckler from Los Angeles. And we are wishing him a happy birthday. Specifically, all of us should have a happy birthday. And specifically, my friend Maher Schmuckler should have a happy birthday. Okay, let's jump into tonight's letter. Baruch Hashem. And by the way, you're wondering, why am I wishing everybody a happy birthday? Maybe we'll talk about that at the end of tonight's class. But yes, today is everybody's birthday. Baruch Hashem, Yud Tes Elul Tavshin Yud Tes Brooklyn, Bracha V'Shalom. Okay, the letter here is from the 19th of Elul. The Rebbe is writing to a woman because it says Bracha V'Shalom, blessings and greetings. Masha hineni kabbalas michtava blizman aksiva by keseves edis matzav rucha v'chol. I'm hereby acknowledging receipt of your undated letter. That Rebbe would always note which the date was of the letter that he received, and if it wasn't dated, the Rebbe would make note of that. In which you write about your matzav ruach. Matzav ruach, we have here translated psychological state, which is a good translation. You could also say your mood, your temperament, your emotional well-being. So apparently this woman wrote to the Rebbe about how she's feeling, and she wrote about a specific issue that she's having regarding, in 1959, when the letter was written, I don't think they would use this language, but in 2023, you might call it social anxiety. You might call it a case of being an extreme introvert. And that's what she's telling the Rebbe is her struggle. And let's find out more. I believe I've already written to you many times. Who is this lucky woman to whom the Rebbe has written many times? Can you believe that? Not just once. Many means more than once. So we don't know who this is. We don't know the name of the person who received this letter, but she was very lucky. She got many letters from the Rebbe. So I know you could take that as like sort of a sharp critique. I've told you this many times, but I'm more distracted by the incredible merit that this person had to receive repeated correspondences from the Rebbe. So to me, that's grabbing my attention a little bit more than the Rebbe saying, hey, I told you this already. At any rate, I told you many times, Shlefi daiti, that according to my opinion, and I have seen this in reality. It's very interesting, by the way, that the Rebbe sets this up as something that is verified by experience. There are truths that we receive, especially a believing Jew who believes in the not only absolute validity of Torah, but that all knowledge and all wisdom is contained within Torah, there is a place for making an argument based on authority. That's how they would refer to it in terms of rhetoric. And to just invoke the authority of Torah and say, this is what Torah says. It's interesting when that's not the argument, when the argument is based on empirical evidence, albeit not, scientifically analyzed. I guess you would call this anecdotal evidence. But at any rate, it was interesting to me that the Rebbe says that this is my opinion and it's based on something that I've seen many times. And by the way, I don't know what an adequate sample size would be if we were looking at this scientifically, but how vast do you think the Lubavitcher Rebbe's anecdotal experience is? In other words, just from the letters that we've learned this past 30 days, we've gotten a glimpse into the and I'm not even talking about the spiritual stuff, how the Rebbe is connected with every single neshama. I'm saying just bedas tachtain, like Chassidim say, just from the very on a very simple level. How many lives did the Rebbe interact with in a very close manner? So if the Rebbe says, I've seen this, yeah, the Rebbe has seen this. The Rebbe has a large sample size of people and cases to draw a conclusion from. Okay. Kol Adam. Here it is. Everyone. That's strong. That's a categorical statement. Kol Adam. Not kama b'nei Adam. Many people. No, Kol Adam. Every person. Mibli yetzim in a klal. The Rebbe doubles down. Without an exception. Sometimes you read a letter that the Rebbe wrote to somebody else and you say, could it really also apply to me? I mean, it's very interesting how the Rebbe answers a person, but could I apply it to me? Who knows? There's different types of people, different personalities, different situations. So maybe maybe I can't necessarily extrapolate something that Rebbe told somebody else to me in my situation. But here the Rebbe says, everyone without one exception. Okay, so I guess it does apply to me and to you and you and you and you and to all of us. Okay, what is it? What is it? Medini hu betava is inherently social, is by nature a social being, a social creature. Okay, that is human nature. We are innately bound to seek out and to require human interaction, to be a part of a society. Although, as understood, it is not equal by everyone. That's important to understand. Of course, there's a spectrum. Of course, there's a scale. Not everyone is equally social. However, this is what I'm understanding. I think it's fairly clear that as wide as that spectrum is, even on the extreme end, like if you have on one end someone who's really, 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 really social and is constantly seeking out interaction with others, maybe someone we would call today an extrovert who's energized by human interaction, that's on one extreme. And then you have the opposite extreme. Even that person on the opposite extreme is still a social being. In other words, the Rebbe is saying there's no such thing as someone who's truly by nature a recluse and a hermit who can really live in isolation. Doesn't exist. Even the extreme, and I don't think I'm at the extreme, but I'm pretty close to it. So I'm feeling this letter right now. I mean, I learned it already. I prepared it before I taught it to you, and yeah, I could definitely relate to this on a personal level. Sometimes I do think, what do I need human interaction for? Like today, I was at the aisle most of the day. Where else should I be? At Alf Nissen. Got back from Mexico this morning. It's so good to be back in Soul Word Studios, isn't it? It's so nice to be back here. But it was great. Shabbos in Mexico City was great. And actually, I mentioned in my class last night, Motzei Shabbos, at the hotel in Mexico City, I said, and maybe I'll see some of you at the oil. And then today at the oil, actually, a friend of mine, should I mention who it is? Levi Chatzkalevich from Penn, Chabad on campus at the University of Pennsylvania. So he came over to me and said, my son wants to tell you something. He's standing next to this Bacher, his son, and his son says, you said last night on the shir that you might see some of us at the oil. So I heard it, and now I'm seeing you. So it came true. At any rate, so I was at the oil all day today, and it is hard for me. It's very crowded. People come over, and they want to talk, and they want to interact, and people say nice things. In fact, it was pretty good for a Lubavitcher crowd. I don't think I got any negative critique. You know, if you hang Lubavitchers like that, you know, Lubavitchers are a tough crowd. So I don't think I got any negative feedback all day. It was all positive stuff, but it's tough, you know. It is. It takes a lot out of me. It takes a lot of energy out of me to have interactions with people. So I'm feeling this letter. At any rate, so the Rebbe says every human being is a social being by nature, without any exception. And although there's a scale, even the extreme person who needs it the least still needs it. Okay. If somebody attempts to live or to conduct themselves in a way that runs counter to that nature. Now, I think that you do know that this is one of the Rebbe's themes, that there is such a thing as the way that a human being functions, and when we try to override that, we cause dysfunction. There are many examples of that. One example I'm thinking of is a letter that we had earlier in the 30 days where the Rebbe said that people who have talents need to use them, and if they don't use them, it causes dysfunction. So people need to be social. Even the person who needs it the least still needs it. And if you attempt to conduct yourself in a way that runs counter to that innate need, what's going to happen? Moving shazeh mevi lidei tisbeiches. The Rebbe calls it here in Yiddish complications. You know what that is? Complications, the chayetze b'zeh, and the like. In other words, dysfunction. You're going to cause yourself problems. You weren't built to be a hermit. And if you try to live that way, even though social interaction is hard for you, you're going to actually cause yourself problems. Uve'ele sheme'eze sibe shetiyeh kosha alehem hayisarvus im b'nei adam. Now, for those people for whom, for whatever reason, it is difficult for them to mingle among other human beings. In other words, they have this basic need. The need didn't go away. However, at the same time, it's difficult for them when they are meeting that need. Harei ein etza ki'im. There is no other advice. I'm struck by, again, the categorical statement. The Rebbe doesn't say, here's an etza, a suggestion, you might want to try this. The Rebbe says this categorically. First of all, categorical statement, every human being needs social interaction. If you try to run counter to that, you're going to cause yourself problems, God forbid. If it's hard for you, there is no other solution than, what is it? Al derech limud haschia b'mayim. There's no other way than the way you learn how to swim. Shezeu yafsher lifnei haknisa b'mayim. The only way to learn is to do it, to go into the water. You could not have a swimming teacher write a bunch of sentences on the chalkboard, maybe even write some diagrams, show you some pictures, and then say, now swim. The only way to learn how to swim is by actually going into the water and doing it. Even if you stand on the riverbank. Well, I didn't go into the water, but I'm very close to it. I'm besmichos to it. Va'olav likpait b'mayim. You have to jump into the water. Va'oz b'derech memele. Very interesting term here. Then automatically, yaschel limud inyan haschio v'seif seif yilamdenu. You're going to start to learn how to swim, and then ultimately you're going to learn it. You're going to be able to do it. It's very interesting. If you go into the water, I mean, obviously with supervision and it's done safely and all that, but you will automatically begin learning. Now, that doesn't mean you'll automatically be good at it. It's obviously, it's a process. But the minute you go into the water, you already start learning. It's very interesting. As long as you're standing outside of the water, you never begin learning at all. But once you go into the water, you immediately automatically begin learning. I mean, I'm not saying that you're good at it yet. It takes time, but the learning process at least has begun the minute you enter the water. And the Rebbe doesn't say this explicitly, but I'm thinking here that it's the mashal, the metaphor that Rebbe is using. Obviously, it's not about swimming. It's not telling you to swim. This is a mashal. It's a metaphor for learning how to socialize. The Rebbe said it's a natural thing for a human being. So it's sort of like something that happens through exposure automatically. Like there's something innate within you, or instinctive even call it, that will be engaged, but it will only be engaged if you go into the situation which forces you to summon up this ability. So it's very interesting. You cannot study how to socialize. You know how many videos there are on YouTube about social skills and learning how to talk to people and how to socialize and how to have charisma? Maybe you don't know because you're not an introvert, so the algorithm isn't surfacing that kind of content to you. But the algorithm knows that Rabbi Taub is an introvert, so every time I go into YouTube, it's surfacing this content. How to not be absolutely socially inept. I get that content all the time, okay? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So those videos have 1 million views, but that's not how to learn how to be social. The way to learn is to go hang out with people. Just like, I presume, watching videos about swimming isn't going to teach you how to swim. But going in the water immediately initiates the process of learning how to tap into your natural ability to swim. You ever seen them throw those babies in the water? It's crazy. The infant swimming lessons. It's wild. I'm not such an expert in this, but so don't do this based on what I'm saying. But yeah, they say babies naturally swim. They put them in the water like little infants, and they swim naturally. I guess, though, if you wait too long, then they don't do it naturally or as naturally. And then there's a whole process where you have to learn it more methodically. But at any rate, yeah, this is our nature, and you have to put yourself in the situation and engage that nature. Yeah, v'chol arichas hamachshava. So all the thinking, be'eis hamidase al sfas hanahar, while you're standing on the riverbank, and you're analyzing, and you're cogitating, and you are, want another synonym? You know, I bought the world's worst thesaurus. Not only was it terrible, it was terrible. It was the world's worst thesaurus. And perseverating. You're standing on the riverbank thinking about swimming. How and what and in which way are you going to learn how to swim? Ein bezet tayelis. It doesn't help a bit. Ki I afshir limud anal ela b'mayim. The only way to learn it is in the water. So this woman is talking about, the Rebbe is going to say clearly in a moment, but she's talking about analyzing how to become more proficient with dealing with human interaction. And the Rebbe is telling her that all of that analysis is for naught, because that's not how you learn how to do it. You only learn from experience. So here the Rebbe says it pretty clearly. In fact, the Rebbe says it so clearly that the Rebbe apologizes first for being blunt. I think we can learn from that as well. So I want to apologize first in advance for what I'm about to say. This metaphor about the swimming is exactly your situation. Asher b'michtaveho mevia tainis l'chiyah v'shlila be'esek shiyeh hakarach b'mesibas b'nei adam u'v'chavrosam. In your letter, you bring all these pros and cons, back and forth arguments for and against about whether or not you should be in a situation where you're going to have to deal with people. Ela shahashak levatarya b'zeh b'shivasa b'chadro. But your whole shaklavataya, your whole analysis that you're doing it from the privacy of your room. In other words, it is completely removed from the actual situation, which is the only place where you're going to actually learn anything and increase your proficiency in this area. So you're sitting in your room in isolation and you're having a whole discussion back and forth, yay or nay, about socializing. It's inherently unproductive. The Rebbe says, I apologize for saying this, for pointing this out. Movin v'gam poshet. She'ein kavonosi lahatif musa. It is understood and obvious that my intent is not to give musa. You know what it means to give mussar. Ethical critique. And I think that's also very important, because a lot of people will tell you, well, it's good to give mussar. No, it's not always good to give mussar. I mean, sometimes it could be, but the Rebbe is saying, no, it's not my intent to give you mussar. I'm not trying to preach to you. I'm not trying to point out to you your weaknesses. That's not what my intent is. That's not why I'm telling you this. Okay, so then why is the Rebbe telling her this? Let's find out. Ella, but rather, lenasis eidapam ulai yeilu dvorai al koponim bepam azais. I'm trying again. Remember at the beginning of the Rebbe said, I've told you this multiple times in the past. So the Rebbe is saying, I'm trying again. By the way, just parenthetically, you know what it says about rebuke? Philo mea pomim, because the Chazal ask, why is it a double lashon? It's like a double. Rebuking you shall rebuke. So Chazal say, our sages say, it means a philo mea pomim, even 100 times. So here's a vart from the Rebbe. That when you do have to rebuke, you should do it so subtly and so soft and gentle that even if it'll take 100 times before the person even detects the message, you should be ready to commit to that slow, gentle process, the long-term rebuke, not the hit him over the head with a mallet on the first attempt type of rebuke. Okay, but I was in the middle of saying, I'm not trying to give you mussar, but rather I'm trying once again that maybe my words should have an effect. Maybe this time it'll be the time. Asher tikbaitz l'seich eze inyan shabal korcha al koponim b'yamim harishenim tia bein b'nei adam mechutz levesa. That you should jump into some situation that against your will force you, at least At the beginning, it'll be by force to be among people and get out of your house. I think that's so powerful. The Rebbe is saying, I'm not trying to give you mussar. I'm not trying to tell you what's wrong with you. I'm not trying to tell you what character defects you need to work on. I'm just telling you something to do. I'm telling you to do something. Get out of your house and force yourself to be among people. It in some ways, it's even more forceful and blunt than Musar, even, because the Rebbe is not even pointing out character defects. The Rebbe is just telling her what to do. But in another way, it's very loving in a fatherly way, which is, I'm not trying to get into a big discussion about this with you. I'm just telling you, okay? I'm older. I'm wiser. I care for you. I know you. Get out of the house. That's it. That's it. I'm just telling you, get out of the house. And it's very interesting that Rebbe says that you should put yourself in a situation that will force you, right? That's the word bal korcha, against your will. It'll force you. And then in parentheses, the Rebbe says, al koponim b'yomim rishonim, at least at first, in the first few days. Okay? And then the Rebbe explains, what does it mean that it'll be by force in the beginning? So then the Rebbe explains, v'tikvasi, so my hope, v'tikvasi chazaka, my strong hope is that what? Asher b'meshech zman le'orech, that after a little while, not a long while, loy titztarich oid lehabal korcha, you're not going to have to force yourself anymore, v'tira roiva inyan v'roiva tayeles gam b'shvil zulasa shel chavras b'nei adam. It's not going to be by force anymore, and you're going to see the benefit to you, as well as, and I love this, the benefit to others. Get out there, start mingling with people. At first, you're going to hate it. You're going to have to force yourself. But after a while, you're not going to be forcing yourself anymore, because you're going to see how it benefits you and how it benefits others. You don't even realize people are missing out on you. There are people that don't even know what they're missing because they don't have you in their life. And I'm talking to you out there. Yes, there are people right now whose lives are incomplete because you have not entered their lives, because it's difficult for you. Okay? And how do I have the chutzpah to say that I'm saying this to someone watching this video right now or listening to this on Spotify right now or whatever? Because the Rebbe set the whole thing up by saying that this is categorical, this is human nature, there are no exceptions, okay? So if you're already an extrovert, great. But if you're on the other side of the spectrum, okay, force yourself to get out there and deal with people. And even if it's hard at first, you're going to see after a while it's good for you and it's good for others. It's good for others. Okay. It is not for naught that a person was created with the nature to be social. Stop a second and dwell on that. This is also a very key theme in the Rebbe's worldview. When Hashem creates something, it is for a purpose. I know, that's Chazal say that. There's nothing that was created, levatala, everything in the world has a purpose. But it's not just a thing, like, oh, there's this object and eventually it'll have a purpose. It's even qualities. If a human being was created with a certain quality, that's not a bug, that's a feature. What, you think that Hashem is like a computer programmer and he writes some code and he says, there's some parts of the code that really, I wish it weren't like that, but if I take it out, then the whole thing, won't run. You think that's the situation? Or you think Hashem knew exactly what he was doing when he made human beings exactly as they are, and every aspect of human nature has a purpose and a use. Now, obviously, it also has a misuse, God forbid. But the fact that Hashem made us social, he made us social beings, and there's no exception. I needed the Rebbe to tell me that there are no exceptions. There are no exceptions to this. The fact that Hashem made human beings social is for a reason. Because we need to get out there. The world needs us. Hashem's plan of Dira B'Tachtonim needs us. And if we would be content being hermits, then that would not happen. So Hashem made it that if we sit alone, and we have Bechira Chavshus, we have free choice, we can choose to be a recluse, but if you do choose it, God forbid, it causes dysfunction and disease, because it's not the way you were made to be, so you're going counter to your nature, and it backs up on you, and it causes problems. So Hashem made us in a way that forces us, without removing our free choice, to get out in the world and associate with others. Okay, let's continue. V'nifloim divrei Razal. The words of our sages are wondrous. Asher hiro heim la'alocha l'maisa b'chaya yem yemim. And these words of our sages are applicable as a directive for day-to-day life. Asher kol davar shebekdusha hu dafke be'asara. That every matter of holiness is specifically in a quorum of 10. You know, like saying Kaddish, for instance, or davening, having a minyan, where you can do a repetition of the Amidah, or you can say Baruch Hu, or a Torah reading. This requires a minyan of 10. Why? Why is that? Not just multiple people, 2, 3, 4, but 10, which 10 represents a complete group, a large group. Wait, hold on, before we go into the Piskim Achsidis. Okay, so the Rebbe is saying, look to the fact that our sages, in their infinite wisdom, were divinely inspired to embed within the fabric of Jewish life the requirement for assembly. And it's interesting, by the way, I didn't catch this the first time I read the letter. The Rebbe is writing to a woman. So he's not talking to her literally about going and davening with a minyan. He's using this as a proof. The fact that the sages embedded within the fabric of Jewish life the constant or regular need for assembling a full group of 10 is a testimony to the fact that being social and associating with one another is necessary for a productive life. Okay, and the Rebbe uses that aspect of Torah and ritual observance as a proof for what is good and normal and desirable. Because if the Torah requires this of us, obviously this is what's right, and this is what we need. So very interesting. Okay, now a second point. V'yedua gam kein piskim achsidus. It's known, the Hasidic saying, I don't know the source of this piskim achsidus, but if you were to ask me my source, it's Igros Kodesh. And if anyone asks you, because this statement, I think to a Torah observant Jew would be a shocking statement. But if anyone were to ask you, where does it say that? You could tell them that it's in Igros Kodesh, volume 18, Chelik Yud Ches, pages 534 through 535. The letter that we're learning right now. And here's the Piskim Chassidus. Hanemer b'shem kama migdalei Teiras Chassidus. The Rebbe says it's said in the name of many greats of Chassidus. The Rebbe doesn't say which names. Okay. Asher gerua yeser lies yechidi began Eden me asher lies v'chulu mit noch Yiden zusammen. It is worse to be alone in Gan Eden than to be, and the Rebbe does not say the words, the Rebbe puts an ellipsis, ... together with other Jews. What is the ... the Rebbe doesn't want to say? It's by inference, you understand. It's worse to be alone in Gan Eden, in paradise, in heaven, than to be in, the Rebbe doesn't use these words. The Rebbe is so careful and sensitive to avoid scary, shocking, negative words, but the word is Gehenna. The opposite of Gan Eden is Gehenna. So it is worse to be alone in Gan Eden than to be together with other Jews in Gehenna. It's a very powerful, surprising statement. The Rebbe says this is a teaching from many of the greats of Chassidus. So this is probably not what the Rebbe is referring to, because this source that I'm about to cite is not Chassidus, but there was a Magid from the Lithuanian town of Ramshishok, and he was known as the Ramshishoker Magid. Rebbe Chaim, I believe his name was. And he used to go around traveling. He was an itinerant preacher, travel around saying speeches. And one of his go-to speeches was about Avas Yisrael, about loving your fellow. And the way that he would set that up is with a parable that he would tell as a personal anecdote. It was clearly a made-up story. It was a parable. It was not supposed to be real. But he told it as if it were a personal anecdote. He said, I just arrived in whatever town where he came to speak. But before I came here, you know where I was? I was in Gehenna. I was in Gehenna. And I came into Gehenna and I saw a long banquet table set with fine dishes and glasses and silver, and there were platters of food. And I thought to myself, how can this be Gehenna? This looks like an exquisite feast. And then I looked a little bit closer and I saw that the people seated at the tables in Gehenna had long spoons tied to their arms, down the length of their arms, like a splint that made it that they couldn't bend their elbows. And each one of them was scooping the food with the spoons that were tied to their hands, but they couldn't bend their elbows to bring the food to their mouth. So the fact that they were sitting at an exquisite banquet was torture for them, because they could scoop the food in the spoons, but they couldn't bring it to their mouths. And then I realized why it was Gehenna indeed. He says, but then I made another stop before I came here. I stopped off in Gan Eden. And in Gan Eden, what did I see? A long banquet table with fine china and glass and silver and platters of food. And the same exact setup. I said, how is this different? And I look around and I said, well, maybe they don't have those spoons. And they did. The same thing, long spoons tied to their arms, the entire length of their arms, from their shoulder all the way to their hand. They couldn't bend their elbows. Same setup like Gehenna. But they were smiling, and they were happy, and it was a joyous mood. And I looked a little bit closer, and I saw one person would scoop the food in his spoon. He couldn't bring it back to his own mouth because he couldn't bend his elbow. But what would he do? Is he would then feed the person seated across from him. And then his friend who was seated across from him would return the favor and scoop up food and put it in the other one's mouth. And that was Gan Eden. I will refrain from trying to interpret this and allow the metaphor to speak for itself. But I believe it was Jean-Paul Sartre who said that hell is not a place, it's other people. Yeah. So if you're an existentialist, the worst thing you can imagine is being trapped in a situation with other people who grate on your nerves, who bother you, and there is no exit. Yeah, I'm referring to no exit. At any rate, that is one view of the world. Is it a true view of the world? I'm going to say something that I normally never say because I'm so hesitant to make categorical statements. But here I'm going to say, because sometimes, is it a valid statement? Yeah, maybe in some context, could be true. Maybe not in all contexts, but not all people, not all times. But is that view a valid view? I'm going to say something categorical. No, it is not a correct view. It is never a correct view. When you are among people, all you have to do is choose to associate with them, choose to interact with them, and by the nature of the human being which Hashem implanted within us, we create a positive experience. And by avoiding social interactions, because we're afraid to have the negative version of being around other people, we don't really save ourselves from any pain or suffering. In fact, we cause ourselves worse dysfunction because we were not made to be alone. We were not built that way. So again, I'm going to refrain from trying to extrapolate on the theological implications of the metaphor, but I'll just make an observation about human nature, which the Rebbe already made in this letter, and that is that we cannot avoid people, even when it's difficult for us. We gain nothing by it. So, what do I want to tell you? I want to tell you, I was thinking about whether or not I should share this. We're almost done with the letter. We got a couple more lines. Before we read the last few lines. Yeah. Okay. So, if you learn with me, especially these letters, I make a lot of personal observations. I do that in these letters much more so than in my other classes. If you learn other texts with me, like Tanya or Shara B'Tochen, I try to read what it says and explain it how I see it. I try not to make personal observations. When learning the Rebbe's letters, I do make a lot of personal observations because I believe that's how it's meant to be learned. And I don't think you have to make the same personal observations that I make, but I think at least I'm trying to model that that's the style of learning, and then you could do it your own way, perhaps, or quite likely better than I do it. So I make a lot of personal observations. I try to refrain from making personal observations. I make personal observations and I make guesses about the letter writers quite often. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. I try to refrain from making personal observations about the Rebbe. Because, first of all, you're talking about a tzaddik, you're talking about a whole different level that is not something that ultimately we can understand with the intellect. You're talking about something godly, and we can talk about it intellectually, but we're never going to grasp it. What is a Rebbe? However, very cautiously, I just want to share with you some facts. And I'm going to try not to make any interpretation of these facts. There was a chassid, Rebbe Pevsner, Olav Shalom, from Paris, France, originally from Russia, but he relocated to Paris, France. And he was speaking to the Rebbe in Yechidus about Paris and the situation there. And the Rebbe was asking why he wasn't more involved outside of the Lubavitcher community, outside of Anash. After the war, a lot of Lubavitchers relocated to France. And so mostly he was dealing with, he was a Talmud Chacham, a real scholar. And so he was mostly dealing with Chassidim, people who knew how to learn and appreciated learning and appreciated his talents. And also obviously spending a lot of time in his own learning, which was he had a special, a knack for that. And the Rebbe asked, well, what about outreach? What about Paris is a town of many Jews. What about going beyond your community? And Rabbi Pevsner answered, and to his credit, he was remarkably honest with the Rebbe, which also I think is something we can learn from, how to conduct oneself in Yechidus. When one writes to the Rebbe, should you be as honest with the Rebbe as you are with your therapist? You should be more honest. I knew a guy who went to therapy for 10 years, and he said it didn't help at all. He says, but in defense of the therapist, he says, he couldn't really help me because I was lying to him the whole time. I said, well, why did you lie to him? He said, are you kidding? You know how much money I was paying? I couldn't afford for the guy to have a poor impression of me. Okay. At any rate, so Rabbi Pevsner tells the Rebbe, Ich bin an Ichnik. I'm an introvert. That's how I'm going to translate Ichnik. Ichnik doesn't mean a selfish person. It has the word ich in it, but it doesn't mean a selfish person. God forbid. It doesn't have that connotation. It means self-oriented or introverted. Like I said, that's really what it means. It means I'm the kind of person, I'm just more comfortable keeping to myself. And the Rebbe told him, Ich bin in mein Tava euchet an Ichnik. Naturally, I am also an introvert. By the way, people who were able to observe the Rebbe in his childhood, people who were present in the Rebbe's parents' home, say that his brother, Yisrael Ayaleb, who they called Label, was very gregarious, and he was a very charming, socially inclined child. And the Rebbe was very serious. He used to stand by himself and learn. He would learn standing up. And he would study. And he would study by himself. So he had that nature. So the Rebbe tells Rabbi Pevsner, I'm also naturally an introvert. And lest you think that it becomes second nature, you should know that it doesn't. And that every time I have to do it is Mesiras Nefesh. It's personal sacrifice. I'm not going to interpret. I'm just stating something that the Rebbe said about himself. The Rebbe said that it is personal self-sacrifice to be in a social setting and to have to interact with people. Okay? I'll tell you something else. Not about the Rebbe, but something that the Rebbe wrote in the Rishimas, the Rebbe's diaries and scholarly journals that were published after Gimel Tammuz. In the Rishimas, I think it's Chaveres Kuf Yud Tes, 119th pamphlet. The Rebbe writes that the Rebbe Rashab, when he first became Rebbe, was very distraught by the demands that people had from him, the personal demands for his time. And he had a difficult time with it until he made a decision, the Rebbe Rashab. He said, I decided to embrace the spirit of the saying, and there in the Rishimas, it doesn't attribute the source of this saying. However, in other places, this saying is brought. The Frierdiker Rebbe brings this in Likutei Deburim and Sefer HaSichos, and the Rebbe brings it as well in, there's a Fabreng in Chai Elul, I think it's Tavshin Chavav, where the Rebbe brings the saying of my ancestor, I'm descended from him, Rabbi Shamshin Astropoler, Toiv Prishus im Habriyais Ubedidus Beseich B'nei Adam. It's a very interesting statement. Prishus means being a hermit. So Toiv Prishus, Prishus is good, being a hermit is good. Im Habriyais, with the people. And Briyais has a connotation of not just people, but the lowest level of description that you can give to people. The masses, the rabble. One should be a hermit among the masses. Yeah, it's a paradox. That's the point of it. Ubedidus b'seich b'nei adam, and to be in isolation. Bedidus is isolation among people. That's what Reb Shamshin Astropoler says. So the Rebbe Rashab says, I embraced that idea, and it did not take automatically. It took a while. It was a process. It doesn't say how long it took, but it was a process of coming into that mode. So we know that Rebbe described himself as an introvert for whom social interaction was difficult. We know that Rebbe Rashab described himself that way. The Frierdiker Rebbe compared the Rebbe to the Rebbe Rashab. In fact, I'm sure you've noticed that the Sharblat, the title pages of the different Sfarim of Chassidus of each Rebbe is different, has a different design. And when the Rebbe made Hayem Yom, so he wanted to know which title page to use, because really it's the Frierdiker Rebbe's sayings, but they were all assembled and anthologized by the Rebbe. So the Frierdiker Rebbe told him, he says, use my father's Sharblat, that should be your Sharblat. He said, my father was a Pnimi, and you're also a Pnimi, so use that one. So if you notice, the Rebbe's Sharblat, the design of the page, the title page from the Kohos Sfarim for the Rebbe is the same as the Rebbe Rashab. Why? Because my father was a Pnimi, you're also a Pnimi. So I'm not interpreting this. I'm just making a statement. The Rebbe referred to himself as an introvert. The Rebbe, in this letter that we just learned, is writing to someone who's struggling, really struggling with being an introvert. And this is, okay, now I am interpreting, but I'm not really interpreting. It's obvious. It's Magid Devorav Liyank V'chukov Mishpatav L'Yisrael. Chukov Mishpatov. That whatever it says about Hashem, whatever he commands the Jewish people to do, he himself does. So if he tells them to put on tefillin, he puts on tefillin. Right? It's from the Bar Mitzvah Maher. So here's the Rebbe giving advice. You have to be a social person. You cannot be a recluse. You can't. You just can't. All right. So it seems, I don't think I'm making anything up. I don't think I'm taking liberties, that this is something that the Rebbe himself personally went through. And whatever value that adds to your appreciation of this letter, I'll let you have your own personal reaction to that. But I thought a couple of times, more than a couple of times, whether this was pertinent. And in the end, I decided that it was. And since I've already gone there, I'll mention that it's Hakel year. Tavshin Pei Gimel is a Hakel year, a year of assembly. Every 7 years is the year of assembly. And we know how dear the idea of gathering all year long, as often as possible, how dear that concept is to the Rebbe. And it's just fascinating to me that somebody who described himself personally as an introvert placed such a value on gathering. And again, I'm not going to try to interpret it, but I'm just stating things that are known, and I'm saying it's definitely something to think about. And I'll allow you to do your own thinking about it. I'll also add that the tension of individuality and group dynamics, and it is a real tension. It's maybe for some people, it's natural to them to be part of a group. But for anyone who has any type of introverted tendency, and especially someone who's an extreme introvert, there is definitely a conflict. It doesn't have to be a destructive conflict, but it could be a conflict that creates like sort of a dynamic tension. And that theme, the dynamic tension between individualism and collectivism, is one of the main themes, if I can share with you my personal observation, it's one of the main themes in the Rebbe's Torah. The Rebbe always dwelled on the paradox of Vayakel Pekudei. Vayakel means the collective. Pekudei means individualization, itemization, separate parts. And Vayakel Pekudei often are read together as one parsha. And the Rebbe would often point out how the great paradox of the fact that the group needs the individual and the individual needs the group. That's the paradox of Vayakel Pekudei. You can't have Vayakel without Pekudei. You can't have Pekudei without the Vayakel. The group needs the individual. The individual needs the group. We need each other. And healthy individuals have to transcend themselves by living for a cause greater than themselves, which means the group. And conversely, the group needs to transcend itself by putting the individual first, which to me is a bigger chiddush. To say that an individual has to transcend himself and live for a greater cause and therefore live for the group, that's readily understandable. But the Rebbe says a chiddush, actually, that the group has to set aside its self-perpetuation. When a group is interested only in self-perpetuation, it becomes an institution. It loses its heart and soul. And the way that a group remains healthy is by putting the individual first. There's a Michtav Klali, Pesach Michtav Klali, where the Rebbe points this out, how Korban Pesach is the first mitzvah that the Jewish people performed. Yes, some say Achedesh Hazeh, but the Kli Yakar points out that the lunar calendar was only established so we would know the date of the Korban Pesach. So the Korban Pesach is at least the second mitzvah, but according to some opinions, the first mitzvah the Jewish people did, definitely the first korban that we brought. And as such, it sets the tone for Jewish identity. And the Rebbe asks, is Korban Pesach a Korban Yachid or a Korban Sibur? You know, Korban Yachid is like a person, God forbid, does a sin, he has to bring a chatas. or he survived some life-threatening situation and he has to bring a taida. That's a korban yachid. Korban tzibur are like the tamid that's brought every morning and every afternoon, or the musaf on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. It's bought from communal funds, from the flat tax of the half shekel. And the Rebbe points out that the korban Pesach uniquely is a hybrid of korban yachid and korban tzibur. Everyone brings it at the same time. So in that way, it's a korban yachid because every individual does it. But they're all doing it at the same time. So in that way, it's a communal affair. It's a korban tzibur. And in fact, that's how Hillel rose to prominence. There was a whole question about when Erev Pesach falls on Shabbos. Do you bring the korban Pesach? Because a korban yachid is not brought on Shabbos. Korban tzibur pushes off Shabbos. And the leadership at the time, the B'nai B'Sera, did not know what to do. You know about that, right? We are the B'nai B'Sera. Let me know if you know the reference. Okay. And Hillel came in and he said, this is also from the Rebbe, you know the famous saying from Hillel about im ein ani li mi li, im ein ani ela la'atzmi mo ani, v'im lo achshav mosai. So those are choice words to live by, but it's also a riddle that Hillel said to explain the mystery of the korban Pesach. Im ein ani li mili, if I don't bring my own korban Pesach, who will bring it for me? Each individual has to bring his own. So korban Pesach is a korban yachid. On the other hand, im ein ani el atzmi, if I try to do this by myself, Moani, what am I? You don't do korban Pesach by yourself. It's the whole nation does it together. So therefore, it's also a korban tzibur. And therefore, since it has an aspect to it that is a korban tzibur, im lo yachshav, if not now, even on Shabbos, hey Mosai, when are you going to do it? You do it now. So the first korban, and according to some opinions, the first mitzvah that the Jewish people performed was a hybrid of communal and individual. And that really is the paradox of Jewish life, that healthy individuals are those who live for the klal, but a healthy klal is one that puts the interests of the little guy first. And the Rebbe actually cites a proof from Nigle that the group puts the individual first in Yiddishkeit. You know what it is? It's from the Rambam, from Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, when he's speaking about Kiddush Hashem. He describes a situation which, unfortunately, is a real situation. It's not a trolley problem, ethical dilemma that somebody made up for some college class. It's a real situation that unfortunately happened thousands of times in Jewish history, and that is a group of Jews are besieged by hostile non-Jews, and the enemy says, "Tnu lanu echad mikem, hand over one of you, and we'll let you all live. And if not, we kill you all." And the halacha is, you tell them, do what you got to do, but we're not handing over one of us. That's counterintuitive because you would think any society that functions by such rules would become extinct very quickly, especially if they were singled out for persecution. And the miracle of Jewish continuity and survival is that not only did we not become eradicated, but those who sought to eradicate us are gone and we're still here. That doesn't make sense. If you live according to a code that says kill the whole group so that we can save an individual, you're not going to last long. But you know what? In Hashem's reality, that's not how it works. In Hashem's reality, the group that puts the individual first is the group that survives. It's counterintuitive. Yes, it is. It is. That's the paradox of Yaakov Pekude. You might notice that I'm going a little bit long. You might notice that we have a few lines left in the letter, and I'm deliberately avoiding reading them. Because I'm going to miss you, and I'm going to miss this crazy, hectic pace of 30 letters in 30 days. It is an absolute whirlwind. I cannot believe that I've been able to keep it up. Thank God. Hashem helps. Hashem gives koyach. But I'm going to miss you, and I'm going to miss this class. And it's Yud Aleph Nissen, so this is, I told you at the beginning, I hinted to it. I said, this is our unofficial Yud Aleph Nissen Farbrengen. Chaim. So if there's still people out there, I think I'm going to talk a little bit longer. And if you got to go, you can go. No, I'm looking on YouTube here. There's people out there. Okay. So I'm going to keep talking. And you can keep cleaning or koshering or tinfoiling or whatever it is you're up to. This is one of my favorite books. Hayem Yem. And here you see the title page. Probably can't see it because it's far away, but that's what I told you. It has the Rebbe's Sharblat, the frame around the title page. So, Hayem Yem for Yud Aleph Nissen for today. This is 1943 that I wrote this book. Very few people knew when the Rebbe's birthday was back in 1943. Very few people knew that it was a concept to know when your Jewish birthday is. That was a secret that was revealed in stages. Okay, Yud Aleph Nissen, Hayem Yem, Yud Aleph Nissen, B'yem Oladis, on your birthday, Alo Odom Lihisbeided. A person should be alone, Lihisbeided, to be alone. You guys are smart. You know where I'm going. You know where I'm headed. Okay, I'm going to keep going slowly. But you know where I'm headed. Alo Odom Lihisbeided. A person should be in seclusion or isolation or by himself. Ulahalis be zichreinesov. He should reminisce or think, remember Ulisbeinin bohem, and he should meditate on his memories. Vatzrichem tikun v'tshuva yoshev yisaknam. Whatever needs to be fixed, whatever he has to do tshuva for, he should fix it. That, like all of the material from Hayem Yem, is taken from the Frierdiker Rebbe's works, from his Sichas Maimorim, letters. It is from a letter that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote to a chassid. Chassid wrote to the Frierdiker Rebbe about his health, and the Frierdiker Rebbe writes and apologizes for the delay. He says, I got your letter on my birthday, and on your birthday you spend the day in seclusion, remembering, reminiscing, meditating, pondering what needs fixing. That's where this line comes from. So let me ask you a question. On your birthday, a person should be misbeided. He should spend his birthday in seclusion. You know the story about when the Rebbe got a phone call from the President of the United States on his birthday to wish him happy birthday. I heard it was Reagan, and somebody said it was Carter. Somebody out there fact check this for me. It was either Carter or Reagan. And because I believe it was 81, or it was 82, I mean. It was 1982, so it would have been Reagan. But you can find out for me. At any rate, the Rebbe told Maskiris to apologize. He can't take the phone call from the president because on a person's birthday, as it says in Hayem Yem, you're supposed to spend the day in private seclusion and meditation. Okay, right, good. So let me ask you something. It's not an opinion question, it's a fact. It's a matter of historical record. How did the Lubavitcher Rebbe spend his birthday? I mean, all you have to do is look in the Titus Menachem and look at Yud Aleph Nissen, and you'll see the Fabrengens, the Rebbe's birthday Fabrengens, Yud Aleph Nissen. Think about that. So, was the Rebbe misbeided, or did the Rebbe make massive gatherings? Which one? Interesting thought, huh? So, I was at the aisle today. I mentioned that already. I was at the aisle today. People were interacting with me. Yeah, I spoke about that, how that bothered me. People were talking to me. By the way, if you see me in public, you can come over to me and talk to me because the Rebbe says that I need it. He says it's healthy for me. So please, don't be afraid. And if I ever snubbed you, I didn't snub you. I'm not a rude guy. I'm just oblivious. Sometimes I'm concentrating so much, literally just on walking or like not bumping into things. I don't have good kinesthetic awareness. So sometimes, like, you'll see me walking down the street, I'm like really working hard. My brain's working overtime just not to walk into the lamppost. And then you think that I ignored you or snubbed you or didn't answer you, but it's really because I was just preoccupied with not tripping. So, yes, you can come over and say hello. You might have to say hello 2 or 3 times, but I'm not being arrogant. I really am just having a hard time being out in the world. So I was at the aisle today, and I was talking to a really wonderful younger man, Mendel Shem Tov. By the way, I think in my phone, the most common repeated name is probably Mendel Shem Tov. But he was the organizer last year of 30 Letters in 30 Days. And he wasn't able to do it this year, but he was incredibly helpful last year. And also, I want to mention this year's team, an incredible team. Levi Katz was the organizer of everything and made sure that the PDFs come out on time and the booklet got printed and the WhatsApp group and the alerts and everything. And then our incredible research team, Zelig Shem Tov and Mendel Rosenblum, and also other people who helped out. Of course, I've mentioned in the past, I'll mention again, Levi and Basi Shem Tov from West Bloomfield. Levi was not able to come to the aisle today. He had a ticket. I saw his son, Mendel Shem Tov. No, different Mendel Shem Tov. And I saw him at the aisle today. But Levi could not come to the aisle today. But the reason is actually he's officiating a funeral tomorrow morning in Detroit for a cousin of mine, actually, Bill Lieberson, who is also a descendant, I might add, from Rebbe Shamshin Ostropoler. That is correct, yes. His neshama should have an aliyah. So I was talking to Mendel, and I think we were talking about this year's Letters Project, and his uncle, right? That's his uncle, right? Yossel Katzman comes over, and he says to us, "What does it say in Hayem Yem? Yud Aleph Nissen. Today you're supposed to be misbaited. You're supposed to be by yourself." He says, "How did the Rebbe spend his birthday? Fabrengens, giving Tanyas." You know, the Rebbe gave Tanyas on his birthday. So what's pshat? So and this was gewaldic. This blew me away. So Rebbe also says, "What's a neshama klalos? What does it mean that the Rebbe is connected to all of us? How does he spend time with himself? Himself? Well, what's himself? Klal Yisrael is himself. So when he spends time with Klal Yisrael, he's spending time with himself. It only occurred to me later on, and then he walked away, and then, whatever else. I didn't get to think about it. I'm a slow thinker. But like a couple hours later, I saw my son. Oh, I should mention, I want to thank Avram Abba Taub, who many of you know from the 4-day live stream fundraising campaign we did last month. He was the one who came on at the end and interacted with me with witty banter. At any rate, Avram Abba helped me to look up some of the Shamshana Stropeler quote about the Taiv Precious Imabrias Bedidas Beseich B'nei Adam. So he helped me do a little research. But so when I spoke to my son, I said, Katzman told me about the Rebbe was misbaited with all of us because the Rebbe is a neshama klolos. So how does he spend time with himself? Who's himself? Hanasihu hakoil. The Nasi spends time with Klal Yisrael, and that's being by himself. So then I came up with it, but only later when I was talking to my son. So I told my son, I said, that's probably why he didn't take Reagan's call. And maybe it was Carter, but it was either Carter or Reagan. But the point is, you understand that? To spend time with the Jewish people. So the Rebbe, Reish Beis Yod, Rosh Bnei Yisrael, is the head of the Jewish people. The Jewish people are one body. So for the head to spend time with itself, with its own body, that's his beidus. B'seich b'nei Adam. But if somebody who's not Jewish is calling, even if it's the president of the United States, then I'm sorry, I have to be by myself right now. Myself meaning the Jewish people. Interesting. During the Mendel Bayless trial, should I keep going? I'm going to stop at some point, but I got more to say, and we got like 3 more lines of this letter. One of the accusations in the Mendel Bayless blood libel was that it says in the Talmud, "Atim kriyim Adam." You, the Jewish people, are called Adam, human. And so there was this anti-Semitic priest who was part of the prosecution. He said, you see, according to the Talmud, the Jews don't consider non-Jews human. So they had to explain that that's not what it means. It's not at all what it means. But they needed help explaining it to a judge. So one of the rabbinical advisors in the trial, the Rebbe Taub was involved in the trial as well, but Meir Shapiro was involved. And in the Welt, they know him as the one who started Hayem Yem. We know him as a very respected, esteemed guest at the Rebbe and the Rebbitzins' wedding in Warsaw. So the Meir Shapiro explained like this. Here's how you answer this. Atem kriyim Adam. And this is what the defense attorney said in court. He said there was a little boy who was murdered, this little non-Jewish child. He says, my client, Mendel Bayless, is not the murderer, but the child was murdered. Somebody did murder him. And his family is devastated. Now, the town where that murder happened, and the trial took years. He says, by now, the town has moved on. The family didn't move on, but the town moved on. And certainly the entire country has moved on. It's just that family who lives with this pain every day. Now, he says, conversely, I want to say something. Mendel Bayless, my client here, is one individual Jew. And every single day, every Jew in the world checks the newspaper to see what's doing with the Mendel Bayless trial. Whether they live here in Russia, or they live in America, or they live in Australia. You know why? Because for the Jewish people, it's not an individual on trial, it's all of us. He says that's what it means, atem kruim adam. Adam doesn't mean humanity. Adam means a person. So atem, plural, you all, y'all, the Jewish people, kruim adam, you're called a person. The Jewish people are not really a people, they're a person. Something that affects one Jew affects all other Jews. And that's a unique aspect of the Jewish people. There are other peoples, individuals who come together to form tribes and countries and societies. But the Jewish people are uniquely a person, an Adam, one person. And this person, okay, so that's what the defense said at the Mendel Bayless trial. But now I'll add my own commentary, which is this person, the Jewish people, like any person, has different body parts, hands and feet, and different vital organs. And it has a head. It has one head. And that's a Rebbe, Reish Beis Yud, Rosh Bnei Yisrael, the head of the Jewish people, the central nervous system of the Jewish people, who knows what's going on in the farthest extremities of the body. So if there is a pain in a hangnail on the toe, the pinky toe, noch, the brain is aware of it. And that's what we've been seeing the past 30 days in these letters. Anyone from all walks of life, rabbis and scholars, teachers, mothers, entrepreneurs, businessmen, observant, not observant, somewhere in between, young, old. They wrote to the Rebbe about all types of matters, communal affairs, personal stuff, family stuff, deep, dark, dirty guilt that they're grappling with. Yeah, we had such letters. All types of things, from the lofty to the darkest aspects of the human experience. All kinds of people writing about all kinds of experiences to one person. And this one person is somehow capable of responding to each of them in the appropriate way. Tell me how one person is able to do that. That's why I want to encourage everybody to take these letters personally. Because we are all one, and we have a head, and the head is connected to all of us, and we are all connected to each other. And the Rebbe's guidance is really, I'll probably get blasted for this. Probably next time I go to the aisle and I'm hanging out there, probably one of the real Chassidish guys is going to blast me for this. But you know what? You know what Igros is? Igros is really my own best advice. Isn't it? Isn't that what a neshama klalis is? Isn't that what Perek Beis of Tanya says? That all neshamas come from Chochmei Allah. And then it starts speaking about lower neshamas and higher neshamas. Hold on a second. You told me in Perek Beis of Tanya that all neshamas come from the same place. Oh, so he explains the Shtalshlis. There's the local train and the express train. So some neshamas come down to the world without any wear and tear. And in their embodiment, they're still like they were in Atzilus. And other neshamas stop in Bria, stop in Yetzirah. And by the time they get down here, they're not the way they were in their source. So we all come from the same source, but by the time we're in the body, we don't all seem like it anymore. But in order to reconnect to our own source, we connect to the Rebbe, This Perek Beis of Tanya. Right there. And you could go check it out. Don't take my word for it. And by connecting to the Rebbe, who remains in embodiment the same as souls are in their pristine source, when we connect to such a person, it reconnects us to how we are in our source and gives us access again to the wisdom and the strength and the courage of our infinite godly souls. So the Igros is really my own best advice. If I were thinking clearly, if I were thinking like my neshama, my chelik elikami mal, mamish, this is the advice I would give myself. And if you understand what it means, Rosh B'nai Yisrael and Neshama Klolos, it is the advice that I gave myself, isn't it? The Rebbe once spoke about Verbringen, Simchas Beis HaShoeva Tafshin Yud, why Yud Aleph, why asking a Rebbe for a bracha is not a problem of, God forbid, an intermediary. You're not allowed to ask an angel to go fetch brachas for you from on high. That's putting something in between you and God, and we don't do that in Judaism. So how come you're allowed to ask a Rebbe for a bracha? Good question, huh? The Rebbe asked this question. And the Rebbe said, actually, there's a question from the Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer asks and answers this question. And he explains like this, that an angel is a separate entity from you. And to ask an angel to be involved in your relationship with Hashem, that's putting something in between you and Hashem. Sort of like taking a call from the President of the United States on your birthday, right? Something outside of you you're allowing to enter into your life. However, a tzaddik and you are one person, because all Jewish people are one person. And therefore, when you're asking the tzaddik for a blessing, you're really asking your best self. So I told you at the beginning of tonight's class, happy birthday. And I said, yeah, I'll get to that. And I'll explain why I'm saying happy birthday to you. Why is it happy birthday to me? My birthday is not Yud Aleph Nisan. My birthday is Chof Aleph Sivan. That was just a random example, although that is my birthday. And each of us do have our specific birthdays. But we also have our collective birthday. Our collective birthday is Yud Aleph Nisan. All of us. We were born. The Jewish people. The Jewish person. A collective and an individual at the exact same time. A collective group that thrives by putting individuality first, and individuals who thrive by putting the interests of the group first. That's the paradox. The last Verbringen, for now, that the Rebbe led was Parshas V'Yakel. It wasn't even V'Yakel Pekudei, Toshin Nun Beis, it was just V'Yakel. And yet, what do you think the Rebbe spoke about? V'Yakel Pekudei, the paradox. And this is one of the marching orders from that final Verbringen. Get together. Make communities. You will find your personal fulfillment, your Pekudei, in V'Yakel, in creating groups. So even if you are an extreme introvert, there's a reason. It's not for naught that Hashem created all of us, without exception, with a deep, deep need for the society of our fellows. We were placed here to perfect the world and to make this earth holier than heaven. We don't do that by being sequestered in our own Dalet Amais, by being hermits. We do that by going out of ourselves and finding others and connecting with them. Go where the people are and connect with them. And you'll find that when you do so, you're actually connecting to your truest self. We're a person, not a people, a person. There are aspects of ourselves we only know through connecting with other people who are really not others at all. And this is what the Rebbe gave us as a last will and testament, if you will. The last Shabbos Verbringen. Vayakel, and especially this year, Tavshin Pei Gimel, Shnas Hakel. Get out there. Connect with people. Even if you don't like it. The Rebbe didn't like it. The Rebbe said that he was also an introvert. You want to finish the letter? Let's finish the letter. Let's finish the letter. Ubi himotzenu b'shilhi chodesh elul hu chodesh horachmim rachmov shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu shehein b'li gvul. As we're now toward the end of the month of Elul, the month of mercy, Hashem's mercy, which is infinite. Yehi rotzin shetaschil hazaza muchlata l'toiv. There should be a resolute change for the better. Uzbasir toiv b'zeh, and you should report good news about this. Bevrachal b'suras toivus, with a blessing to report good news, with a chsiva v'chsima toiva, and may you be written and inscribed for good. And that, my friends, is the letter, our 30th letter. Thank you for being part of this journey, and may we all continue to connect deeply to the deepest, truest self, to the Yechida, the core of ourselves, which is synonymous with the idea of his kashrus to Nesidereinu, the Rosh Bnei Yisrael. The more we understand this concept, the more we understand that becoming our true selves and living up to our potentials and becoming the best version that we can be of ourselves, that, for a Jew, is synonymous with cultivating a relationship with a neshama klalis, with an aggregate soul who's connected to all souls, by learning his teachings, absorbing his teachings, learning how to think the way his teachings teach us how to think, following his directives, doing what he told us to do. There's a Siyum Rambam coming up, base year, by the way. If you haven't started being careful about Rambam every day, you can start now. And making Hakel gatherings and everything else that Rebbe told us to do. You know, a bacher, a friend of mine, comes over to me today, and you know who he is. I've been seeing. He came over to me. Yeah, shout out. He comes over to me and he says, "What's Yud Aleph Nissen all about?" I said, don't get philosophical on me. You know what you're supposed to do. Get up, say Meida Ani, daven like a mensch, learn Torah, go on Mivtzayim, help a Jew. I mean, come on. The Rebbe told us what to do. So, yeah, we should just continue being true to ourselves. And it's through our relationship with the Rebbe that we do that. Okay, one more story. The last dollars, the day after the last Fabrengen. I told you about the Fabrengen of Parshas V'Yakel, Tavshin and Beis. But the next day was Sunday, and the Rebbe gave out dollars, Sunday dollars. And one of the people in the dollar line was Gabriel Aram from Toronto, originally from Hungary, and then of Toronto, publisher of Lifestyles magazine, which is an executive magazine, not a Jewish magazine. And but he made it a special article or feature about the Rebbe for the Rebbe's birthday, because this was Chav Vav Adar Tavshin and Beis, so this is just like a few weeks before the Rebbe's 90th birthday. So there's a video. You can watch the video, a gem video. So he asked the Rebbe, what's the Rebbe's public statement for his 90th birthday? And the Rebbe speaks in English to him and says, well, 90 in Hebrew is tzaddik, right? Every Hebrew letter is corresponding to has a numerical value, right? That's how gematria works. So the Rebbe says 90 is tzaddik. And that is an indication that every Jew can be a tzaddik. So you see what happened. Gabriel Aram wants to write a feature about the Rebbe. And the Rebbe flips it on him and says, it's not about me. It's about every Jew. You understand that? And that is what a Rebbe is. You want to know what his kashrus is? It's not going around and telling everyone how great the Rebbe is. His kashrus is believing the Rebbe when he tells you how great you are and living like it. The Rebbe says, it's not about me, it's about you. Who's the tzaddik? Me? No, you. You're the tzaddik. You're the tzaddik. And I got another thing to tell you. You're going to bring Mashiach. The Rebbe said it from day one, the first official Fabrengen, Yud Shvat Tavshin Yud Aleph. Every individual, Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam, comes down to your personal responsibility to perfect the world. Again, you have Vayakal Pekudei, the global and the individual, all at the same time. Your personal job in life is to perfect the universe. The collective and the individual, all in one. The Rebbe announced the deepest truth. I don't know how our ancestors understood the meaning of life, but from 1951, here is the way we understand the meaning of life. There can be no personal fulfillment without global vision. In microcosm, the Rebbe is saying it in a more subtle way to this woman in this letter, that your personal well-being depends on interacting with other people. But in other places, the Rebbe says it even more explicitly and more forcefully and on a much grander scale, that the perfection of the universe is the individual responsibility of every Jew. And conversely, your personal fulfillment is the perfection of the universe. You cannot be satisfied just trying to have a good life. And I don't mean a good life materially. I don't suspect any of you that you think that the definition of a good life is to take vacations and have and go water skiing and sip pina coladas on the beach. I don't think that that's what you... I mean spiritually, that you want to finish Shas, and that you want to daven a 10-minute Shemona Esrei. Yeah, you have spiritual aspirations, okay? And those are beautiful, and you should do those things. This is not to negate those things. You should do those things. But you know what you should also do? You should also step up and admit that you're the leader of world Jewry. You, yes, you. You are the leader, because the Rebbe put it back on each and every one of us. Bishvili nivra olam. You have to take this personal, that the perfection of the universe comes down to you. And that's Yud Aleph Nisan. That's our birthday. That's our birthday. A birthday is the day when we become aware on a deeper level of why we were put here on this earth. So today's our birthday. And we all have to take stock. What are we doing to perfect the universe? And don't think that you're being so noble and altruistic. And don't think either that you're being overly ambitious when you start planning on perfecting the universe. It's a normal thing. That's how a Jew should think. Your personal life, your story, your narrative, I'm going to tell you how it ends. You're the one who brings Mashiach with your mitzvah. That's what it is. So it's your birthday. Take stock of where you've been, what you've done. Be proud of what you've accomplished. Take seriously where there may be a lack, what you could be doing more. And get out there. Get out of your house. Like the Rebbe told that woman. Get out of your house. And good things are going to start happening. I promise you. Just get out of your house and talk to people, and good things will happen. Good things will happen. Okay. Happy birthday again. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. Just happy birthday.